Hey guys, thank you for tuning in to Scorpius Tactical. Josh, Matt here, and awkward as ever. Hey, we are going to touch on some topics today, and something that we are always going to present from is from the gun shop side, not from the gun shop in the sales side, but gun shop from what have we seen in builds, what have we seen has been working for people in gear, and what are things that they have invested in that end up being a solid investment. So
kind of the behind the counter view.
Yeah, with the customer in mind first and foremost. So
Exactly.
All right, what are we covering today?
So just kind of hopping right in. Let's talk about the current administration or new administration.
Big balls?
No, not big balls. He's part of it.
He's actually part of the administration now, though.
Oh,
He's actually part of the State
part
Department.
of Doge.
No, State Department.
Oh.
He got a job today at State Department. Big Balls has a job at State Department.
Even better.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's Mr.
But
Big
no,
Balls.
more in terms of Trump. What is he doing? What is he doing specifically for 2A? Good, bad, ugly? Because I know in his first term, he was not very 2A. He was actually anything but. He did the only 2A stuff he hit was very anti-2A.
Unfortunately, and they were three main points, but it was not positive for us in the slightest, especially from a suppressor standpoint, a part standpoint that are not a firearm. So
the bump stock thing.
That's what I mean. Like, it's a parts. It's not a firearm. It's not serialized. It's been hard to keep up with. I mean, we're filming this on Monday, February 10th, and we have Friday was an EO, an executive order that was signed saying
we're reviewing all Second Amendment issues basically that are happening right now.
And they mentioned specifically the past administration, but from what I'm understanding, they're talking about it more so from, I don't think the most over. The reality is we don't have enough data to even know what it is they're going after. But I will say, I feel like the girl being asked to the prom, where the Second Amendment is being talked about in an executive order before way before the first 100 days.
Oh yeah.
And as much as I will not be super positive toward most administrations,
there's a list of things that I want to happen,
but I'm also not very positive of most administrations. This is actually something that I'm like, okay, nobody's done this.
Yeah, most administrations have been honestly anti-2A for as long as I've been alive.
Yeah, I mean, technically, when I was born, I mean, the 80s was not good either. So yeah, the reality is, it does feel like we're being paid attention to. The other thing that I saw was that Donald Trump Jr., with his company Field Ethos, which is a magazine for mainly hunting.
Don Jr.'s?
Yeah.
Oh, shoot.
So he actually had a meeting with Meta, and we, as a business who is affected by our social media, it looks like there's positive things. So overall, Second Amendment is definitely on the minds of Washington, D.C., and there's things that are happening. Quite honestly, there's also so much happening that it's hard to even keep up with.
There's a lot going on in the courts right now, too.
Correct.
I mean, that Mississippi judge, the article I read said he begrudgingly did that only for the plaintiff, but hey, man, that sets precedent.
Yeah, machine gun. Like, okay, yeah, dude, you're the one who's allowed in like down in the South to have a machine gun without but overall, I think that there's positive things happening, and I think that having some sort of positive attitude toward it is a good thing. At the end of the day, we always have to realize that there are pretty evil people amongst the groups who will do anything to continue to turn us all into the criminals that they want us to be portrayed as.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's our whole job is to hopefully, notify people of what we see. And if there's stuff that you guys see, you should let us know in the comments. Because if there's something happening more statewide that's in a specific state, again, the beauty of the United States, there are things that we will not see federally.
And we can only track so much. Two guys.
We're in Reno, Nevada, so we are 7 miles from the border of California. So we track California, but we track Nevada, and Nevada has done some of its own bad things. The frame and receiver, we're waiting on that response.
All the Brady bill by itself.
Yeah, we're a Brady state.
Yeah.
Do you think that we will see positive outcome, or is this just dust? This just dust being kicked up?
I think at the very least, there's going to be some positive.
Okay.
You can't keep talking about it and not have something happen. Like the biggest thing I'm excited for is like, obviously the suppressors going faster. That's amazing. I don't think that's an administration thing. That was more of a
operations.
Yeah, operations and administrative.
Yeah,
administrative.
Well, it's actually a tool because they ended up using LexisNexis which is a private company that has all our data, and it made it faster. So it's good. Private party
with all our data. Awesome. But we did get suppressors back, like some in less than 24 hours. Which was insane. Awesome.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, right now, what we're tracking is about 85% are getting cleared in 4 to 5 days.
Yeah,
that is
4 to 5 business.
4 to 5 business days. That's pretty darn phenomenal, considering there's some people who are like, yeah, it took me 13 months. It took me 14 months. And those weren't that long ago.
No, that was a year and a half ago.
Mm-hmm. But there's no rhyme or reason. I think that's the difficulty.
Yeah, because some people there's a gentleman who, I'm not going to name names, obviously, but he guarantee you he is cleared, but it's taking forever.
Yeah. Like, we don't know why. And again, this is based on data that's being input by humans. That mistakes are made, we end up seeing them.
Yep. All right. So to kind of reel back on what I'm kind of excited for this administration, in terms of 2A, I know it's been tossed around a lot. If we get nationwide reciprocity, that's the thing that I think realistically could happen.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are talking about the NFA, like, oh, repeal the NFA. I think anything's possible. That takes an act of Congress.
I mean, we're over 90 years of that being in place, essentially, or coming up on 90 years.
Like, obviously, I want to be like, yes, at the very least, SBRs and suppressors off the NFA. But I think the most realistic thing that is going to happen is nationwide reciprocity. Treat your CCW like a driver's license.
Correct. And Thomas Massey is absolutely fighting for that. And his whole thing is that you shouldn't be asking the government for permission for a God-given right.
Absolutely.
And we can only do little things at a time. So I will have to admit that any little step is a positive, because the reality is all of us would just wipe everything.
Oh, absolutely.
But the reality is that is not the current ecosystem we work in. We have a very divided like culturally in some ways, and then also just from politically. So
I mean, 2A culturally, I think that a lot of people on the left are starting to get into 2A. Which is interesting to see. I think it's a good thing in the sense of the more out there, the better.
I mean, we watched literally on X. This was really close to, I think, either the inauguration or it was in the election. I can't remember. But essentially, much more left-leaning, much more anti-gun, saying, I feel like I need a gun. And then the conversation was like, oh, don't buy a Like, there was literally a conversation of like, what
they were linking like T-Rex Arms videos, linking like all these like information videos that we usually would say, hey, go check this out. This is great information.
So is this gun culture, whatever, 0.0, 3.0? Like, is this now where it's
it's truly everybody?
Yeah.
Potentially. Yeah. I mean, at least from the shop perspective, there's been more than a couple.
The interactions are definitely different.
Interactions are
changing. Yeah. They're actively moving.
Yes. And I've seen, at least my perspective, a lot less of traditional gun guys. Like, I've had the night vision conversation a lot less than I have in years past.
And much more of the entry level.
Yeah. Yeah. Which has been it's nice to change it up.
Well, I mean, 2020 was 5 years ago. So the reality is 5 years, or like those 3 years of just absolute craziness have kind of gone away. Now people are going back to, I spent X amount of dollars then. How do I make this thing work? And this isn't not political side anything. Yeah. But people are like, what do I do for the optic? And then they're like, when I was talking to you, we were talking about this optic. Now you're like, primary arms 5X with the top dot.
Yeah.
Like, had they talked to you 4 years ago.
I've also had so many optics in between. In the past 2 years, I've probably had, on this gun in particular, 6 different optics.
In 4 years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a problem.
You have it's not restless rifle syndrome, but it is.
This rifle is perfect.
You have an optic issue. It is one of the coolest things that you can test, which is with a world where barter and like trade or whatever, like you can actually try something new, get that
play with a bunch of different stuff,
and then whether it's
it allows me to give much better feedback to anyone asking about red dots, prism, LVPO,
to actually have an opinion behind it because you ran it.
Yeah, and have a database.
And me and Jason telling you that you've been wrong on all the ones that you've done, and ours are right. Now, that's the whole thing, though. I think that's the beauty of this. There isn't actually a right answer for individually people, and people need to start feeling really strong about that, so that they can make their decisions and go home no, I made the decision for me, not because X person is running it.
And be confident in the equipment they get.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I have a red dot for home defense, and that's my primary purpose. Dude, amazing.
Unless it's a red dot on 12.5 that you're trying to reach. Okay.
This is perfect. I change it.
This is the 12.5 listed in our other video about the 12.5 build, which is kind of in the current. No, it's in the current
situation. It didn't have the top dot.
Okay. But 12.5 being that you're still not arguing that 12.5 isn't a phenomenal
it's a
jack of all trades.
It's a
master of none.
Yeah, it's not going to be good at anything. It's not going to be great at anything. It's going to be good at everything.
Is there one spot that it actually shines the best though?
No.
It does. At being better at more things.
Well, yeah.
So that's what it shines at.
Yeah, true.
Okay. So I'm just saying, like, because everybody's always trying to find that perfect one.
The amount of
there's not a perfect
on barrel length. I mean, there's so many.
It's ad nauseum. I mean, it now the barrel length conversation with like the arcs and stuff like that.
That's a little bit different. Yeah. That's a whole another data set that we're going to see another 15 videos on in a year.
Yeah.
Especially if AAC starts making arc.
That would make it much more doable.
Yeah. So speaking of AAC and kind of the gun industry, to kind of pivot, the state of the industry right now. So we just got finished with SHOT Show a month ago.
I mean, it's been 3 weeks. I didn't go down this year. There was much more value of me being here, and I think that it's because of a past life of what I've done before. Yeah. We live in a social media world where you're getting so much. Because companies
get blasted with new,
but they have to have new content, so they have to start launching that stuff early. Mm-hmm. So quite honestly, anybody who's actually actively involved or seeing stuff, and I'm saying more customers are seeing this stuff.
Oh yeah,
well before even the guys who are like, oh well, what do I need to bring into my shop? They're behind. We're a little bit nerdy where we're trying to watch all that stuff, but what I found is it wasn't valuable for me to get down there. So state of the industry, I will say there was a lot of I call it Me Too product. It was like, hey, we're going to come out with our product of the same thing.
To me, and again, I didn't follow it very closely. I didn't follow SHOT Show insanely closely this year. What I did see, a lot of it just seemed soulless. It seemed, like you said, catch up.
It's catch up, it's Me Too, or it's new shiny doodad to the same effect. Yeah. I think the most exciting thing I saw was from Lima 6.
Yeah.
Which wasn't which was not
it wasn't even a SHOT Show.
I think he got to go. I can't remember if he was there. Nonetheless, a belt-fed AR-15 upper, and that's been in works for a while. But he has CAC Industries behind him, Red Right Hand, who is looking at the heat sink for it, and he's been getting handguards from everyone from Strike Industries.
I think he's going
to Midwest, and he's seeing which one gives the most amount of distance off your hand.
Okay,
to manage the heat, but that. At the price point he's talking about, I think he's talked about. I won't say it because it's in development, but it would be
at the lower price point than the Fight Light.
Yeah,
belt fed up, significantly lower.
And within a group of friends, it's very doable to invest in and be like, oh, we've got to
invest in a squad automatic weapon for reasons.
Automatic, automatically the squad weapon.
Well, yeah, you do a super light Geisler, obviously. Don't rate me.
What is there anything, obviously we watched from a distance, like anything outside of, I saw more stuff on X than I saw.
The stuff I saw, it was, the one thing I was most excited for, it was the Holosun V-Cell laser. And they announced that
the whole line.
The whole line, which I think is going to shake up the night vision laser market. Because the price those things are going at and the power output they're putting, from what I've seen, it's amazing. And I think these laser companies...
I believe Barrel and Hatchet's running one on his as well, and he said power was impressive.
Yeah, because the laser market honestly has been kind of crappy for ever.
It's been prices going up and nothing changing.
Yeah, the power outputs, like the exceptions were like the mall, but the mall is ungodly expensive, and it's not something I usually recommend just for the price,
right?
Because most people can't afford that and still go out and shoot.
Right. If it's the decision between a $3,000 laser or a
$3,000 worth of ammo,
or $2,000 worth of ammo and $1,000 on a laser,
I'm going to do the $1,000 laser and ammo all day.
Absolutely, because it's a tool, but it's not
the end all be all.
It's also not something going for a contract.
No,
sorry, the contract is what gets those prices where they're at.
sense. But yeah, that was the thing I'm most excited for. And it wasn't even SHOT Show this year; it was last year.
Yeah. Okay. State of the industry. Are we at the point where we're over our skis? And the reality is, to stay relevant, do we have to keep seeing manufacturers come out with something new, but it's so far from actually hitting the market that we're going to get people bitter? I think
manufacturers need to have a just pivot from most manufacturers. Like, obviously, I'll support the smaller guys coming out with all the new cool stuff like Lima 6 and Red Right Hand. They're actually innovating, where a lot of these major manufacturers, it's on the part side, it's on the nylon side specifically. I've seen a lot of nylon.
Yeah.
It's like, you're just kind of doing the same thing. I think they just need to double down, increase manufacturing. So a lot of these companies are, I don't want to say drop hype beast, but they're constantly out of stock on stuff. And like, hey, let's just double down on the stuff we know, the stuff we do.
So I think that's the interesting thing, is that as a manufacturer, with a lot of the nylon companies, a lot of the companies that make quality parts, the thing they run into is that person hasn't worn it out. No. So you have to come up with something new and innovative to make them go, oh, I want to buy that. Whereas the reality is that might not be the actual answer for what's best for the community.
I think that some of these manufacturers, and there's a couple in particular that come to mind, they encourage people to get out and use it.
Yes.
Like, hey, get out and use it. I will say, like, a lot of people trash Condor.
Yeah.
We have thrashed some Condor, and Condor's motto is like, for the everyday hero. Like, yeah, it may not be your Gucci tier stuff, but
it did get somebody into it.
It did.
And it allowed for them to not have a barrier of entry. Yes. And it allowed for different demographics to actually come together and actually make the community stronger, which, as kumbaya as that sounds, if we don't, this is going all the way back to the Second Amendment stuff with an administrator. If this community doesn't start figuring out how to not have its own little quarrels,
eat each other alive,
we could be so much stronger. And we need more demographics that are looking at, like, not demographics, but like, there's people on the outside who are like, I just can't enter it because my buddy spent $3,000 on a gun.
Maybe it's the college kid that's like, hey, I'm balling on a budget. I got a PSA rifle and that's it.
Like, hey, which them, along with like a Condor, they are doing that thing, which is like rifle in every hand.
Absolutely.
And gear for everybody.
Absolutely. And like, a lot of people will turn their nose up at that, but that's the future.
And the cool thing is, we've watched people who have had stuff for, as I look up, I'm looking at the shop, like stuff that has where they started, and then they moved on to whether it was HRT or S-Tech, or S-Tech ended up like making their plate carrier better, like
making the base level better.
And they've slowly like grown, and then they've gone, we've watched them change. They're like, I won't go from a slick to a slick carrier with a chest rig or a split rig.
Yeah.
And then they're back. And that's as they use it more, they realize. But then their stuff ends up going into their buddy's hands who wants to get into it.
Exactly.
And it helps pay.
Like, it's kind of like a self-feeding
ecosystem. Good, which is good, because the reality is there is always somebody on that outside who's just like, I can't do it.
Yeah. And it's sad. And again, on the community side, I think we need to, like, all of us in general need to do a better job of like having that hard conversation with people, where it's like in that person's back of their head, they're like, oh, I really want to try it, but it's so intimidating that I'm not even going to ask the question.
Yeah, and like remove the intimidating factor from it.
Yeah, be that good ambassador for the community. Like,
and again, this sounds like kumbaya stuff, but the reality is, if we don't start doing this, I've seen it in the action sports industry. People did it. It was haves, have-nots, and it was, hey, you can't come here with that entry level stuff. It's like everybody had to start somewhere.
Oh, I saw it when I was down in San Diego and I was trying to get into surfing. I got my Costco surf. The Wave Runner.
Oh God. Okay, that's a whole no.
Yeah,
I agree. No,
but same thing.
But it is. It's just that there's a cultural barrier.
We need to kill the holier than thou.
Yeah, and we had the conversation tonight. Like, there's a whole crew of Scorpius guys that are going out and competing, and that's improving the community. And then we can hopefully introduce people who are here who are like, kind of want to do it,
but they don't feel like they're good enough. But it's like, no,
you just need somebody there to help you, or feel like I know somebody there.
When I started competition, it was Jason, another gentleman who used to work here.
Yep.
And they're like, no, we're dragging you out. You're competing. You're part of the crew.
And then what did it feel like once you did that first night?
Oh, I was super nervous.
But after
it was so much fun.
Well, when you got done, you were like, was it as daunting? Was it as daunting as you made it in your head?
No, because at least in the competition world, which I highly recommend a lot of people look into, it's a very welcoming community. Everyone there, at least
Yeah.
from Reno, Nevada, where it's the only place I've competed, everyone there is super welcoming. Everyone there is super cool.
But it allows for you to take your gear, which is the conversation we literally just had
Mhm.
before we closed up the shop, which was you have all the things. You need to go see how this works. And the person who's doing this was a tuner in the car world, which is the beauty of like, okay, I tuned it, now I put it on the track. Okay, that's the same thing with all this gear. So
Cool.
what else did you want to touch on?
Kind of going back to the industry in terms of parts manufacturing, in terms of AR-15 specifically. Well,
Okay.
maybe not specifically, but just parts manufacturing in general. So what we're doing here at the shop and then what we see happening going forward in 2025.
As far as specifically us in Scorpius, what I wanted to do, which I applied to multiple different industries I had, is figure out where we can have direct lines of conversation and can actually get these parts directly from manufacturers that are making the parts. The perfect example of that is our relationship with Schmid. Through our research, we ended up finding, hey, Schmid makes this trigger for countless other people.
A large majority of the industry in terms of AR-15 builders.
Correct. Specifically in any of those enhanced mil specs. So if you're talking about a BCM PNT, Schmid.
Sons of Liberty fighting trigger.
Schmid. The ALG ACT.
And the QMS.
The hammer is Schmid. I believe the shoe might be Geisley, but only because I don't see the coatings the same exact way, but the markings are Schmid.
The markings are Schmid.
And what we wanted to do was, instead of margin stacking, that, you know, where builds are not as much of an option for somebody, we allow for getting that same quality.
Yeah, you're able to get a good trigger without having to dump $250 for a trigger. Where like Geisley's are amazing triggers,
Yeah, Ferrari.
But hey, like maybe somebody doesn't want to drive that Ferrari at first.
Or yeah, it's already daunting to start already. So okay, this helps that barrier to hopefully be there. Or also our ability to take what we have learned as far as what ends up being kind of a jack of all. Like, hey, well, this is really good with our trigger, the STO1 now, which is a culmination of parts from Schmid, which is a straight-faced shoe and a nickel boron hammer. And what it does, we also soak it in a compound called PB80, which just in the phosphate, it actually absorbs that, and it's dry, but it ends up being just more,
makes it smoother.
Basically. Yeah. And what it was is it gives you, because of the fulcrum point of a straight face, gives you a very, what feels like light pull, but it's definitely still
it's a 5-pound trigger.
Yeah, 5 pound even. After we did four or five pull tests on it, it was 5 pounds every single time.
Yep.
And so it allows for a very upgraded trigger
without breaking the back, like it's
at all.
$100 or something like that.
I think it's $85. So
yeah,
we got to do that. Now Schmid has been a great partner in that. I think if we can grow that, that'll be really cool. But it does give you more of that, like the whole idea is like not like working man's, but like duty level.
Well, it keeps you rounded out, so you're not dropping all of your money on a trigger, and now you have to have just the worst barrel.
Yeah,
it allows you to have a good trigger, but I can also get a good barrel and get the system up and running in a much better holistic sense.
Yes, in looking at instead of looking at, hey, the gun only costs this much, now we're looking at the whole thing, because if it doesn't work all together, there's no point. And like we always tell people, it's like, it's not just a rifle. It's going to be a rifle. It's going to be optic. It's going to be light, and it's going to be a sling. So it's going to be those abilities for you to,
at a minimum, that's what recommend.
Like that's where we're going to start with the new guy. So, and for those who have progressed, this trigger flat face at first, I didn't always like it, but the angle on that, the amount of purchase area on it, and then how rigid it is with the backing of it. Yeah. It feels like you can run it really hard, and it doesn't look slim.
Really hard,
but it doesn't look slim like it could be a breaking point.
No.
Like some of those ones that are like flat face, but there's
tossed that gun multiple times since.
Yeah, you love throwing your
Yeah,
gun.
well, it
can. But
back to the industry and the manufacturing side, just to kind of dial it back. Schmid is a great example of trying to go directly to manufacturers, and at least here in the shop, we're kind of you've done a great job of finding those companies that are doing something actually different, but they're actually doing it.
Yes.
Like CAC, another great example.
Yep. It's
their BCG.
The K-Spec. Yep. You're now over 3,000 rounds on it and have ran it dry for 600 some odd rounds.
But CAC, they make insane, like really good quality parts, but they're not doing that margin stacking. So we have had a few people clone this rifle or pistol, I guess, and it's come in significantly less than what I spent for it. We're able to get out and use them.
Yeah,
they still have a good quality rifle,
and you're getting to see those ones that we build shot with you guys when you've gone out. So Absolutely. it's like okay, this is performing the same way.
Yes,
which the gassing and stuff that we work on is the key to that. No, CAC, between CAC and now Griffin Armament, we now have the ability for good, better, best options, standard, some billet options from CAC or Forge, and then also the ambidextrous.
Yes,
and it's one of the best priced ambidextrous models on the market, and it's one of the actually most fluid. Like as far as the bolt release, it does not take an immense amount of pressure. It's actually very natural.
It is, and like especially with Griffin, I know a lot of guys, me included, kind of turn their nose up at Griffin suppressors for the longest time. I never even looked into them, but now after looking into them, I was like, they actually have a good ecosystem of different style of mounts. So Plan A versus, I know Plan B is all the rage right now, but the Plan A mount, tapered mounts.
Yep.
Where before we were always the shop of like just do a dead air chemo. Well, we're starting to see the flaws in that come out.
And it's because of wearable parts within a detent system that ratchets.
Yes.
So Griffin, that was what I was getting to, is that Griffin was a much wider player as far as what we could get, but we tested all these parts before we got them in, got to put them together, and then got to shoot the suppressors. And it was like, okay, wait a minute. These aren't ridiculously priced. They're performing really well. And then they do have some upgrades where it's like, oh, this is a taper mount with a dual lock system. If you're really wanting to make sure that you just feel like I'm not having to check if it's walking off, that's an option. It looks a lot like the chemo, and it's got that like.
I always assumed it was just like the chemo.
No, it literally locks over and then stops it from walking at all. I believe that's the one that just got a contract as well. But with the EcoFlow baffles,
which I will say that contract, I'm not going to name who it is, but their requirements for it were insane. It was like a full combat load of 7 mags in 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
And no walk.
Yeah.
So that is.
And it's a hard use can, so you can feel like you can actually go and beat it up. It's not, super light. It's not super short, but the EcoFlow baffles allow for not as much gas stacking. So we weren't seeing as much blowback.
It just made it a much more pleasant can to shoot as an end user.
But we weren't losing the flash signature.
No.
And so we weren't losing something to gain something. It was like, it kind of made it all around better.
Yeah, because that was the kind of problem with the flow through cans. Is it was very nice to actually shoot them, and as a shooter, you didn't get a lot of gas in your face, but
or we didn't have to update things to make it work.
Yes. So I really enjoy them. I think they're a good fit.
So I mean, that is kind of an evolution of the store. I think it's really hard, or it's different for a lot of people to see. Yeah, companies like Aero Precision used to be foundational parts of all here, but we're seeing cracks in the foundation of where some of these manufacturers coming out of COVID. What does the ecosystem look like, and how do we, if we can't supply these parts and they're unobtainium, that's not an option for us. So we had to change where we could actively keep getting stuff, which it makes it harder because we're now direct with a manufacturer, meaning our orders are not just from distribution, but it is allowing for us to get some stuff that everybody's not getting.
Yeah, and it allows us to do things where, because one of my biggest pet peeves is kind of the dishonesty in the industry, right?
Yeah.
So it's certain manufacturers raising the price of their rifles an insane amount by $500 to $1,000, if not more.
The brand equity.
Yeah, the brand equity. And like, cool if y'all can do that, but I can go through and piece every single part out that you used. And even with your parts, proprietary parts that these companies make, it still comes out to a much cheaper rifle as long as they don't assemble it. And that has always been a huge pet peeve of mine.
We'll be on a next episode. I want to talk about why the Frankenstein build has a negative connotation when the reality is it really gives us actually the best option to have the best parts.
I would say it's a negative connotation. Well, we'll get back to that whole thing.
But that's what we're going to cover is that you can really look at all your parts on your own and actually build probably the best concoction.
Yeah, and we're going to pick and choose.
Yeah.
So, and we'll go dive in
next time.
Yeah, next time.
Hey, sorry for the brief interruption, but just wanted to let you guys know that if you enjoy this type of content or any of the content we put out, whether it be long form, educational, or anything else that we do, please do let us know so we continue to put out the stuff that you guys want. And then also, if you do want to support us and help us keep pushing out more and more stuff for you guys, the best way to support us is through the shop. So whether it be online at scorpiustactical.com or in person at our shop in Reno, Nevada, let us help you out with all your firearms and tactical gear endeavors, and we'll hop right back into the podcast.
All right, something that you always look into a lot more as far as, the breakup of all the different things we all do here. Nylon, gear, armor, medical. What are you seeing for 2025 as far as either is it a focus or is there a pivot?
My guess is, because at least from the behind the counter here, it's definitely been a lower interest in the nylon. My guess is, because how it usually works with a newer shooter is they come in, they get their rifle, and then they start going out and they start asking the question about the supporting equipment. Mm-hmm. That's really what drives over to the nylon, whether it be chest rig, plate carrier, medical, which is extremely important. So we're seeing a lot of those newer gun owners, at least newer to this style of shooting and platform. So the civilian defense style.
Yep.
My guess, come summertime or springtime, especially once it starts getting warmer here, even though it's very warm winter.
It's been good so far. We've been able to shoot when we normally can.
Yes. I think it's definitely going to ramp back up more, especially considering we're already, at least on the political side, we're already seeing protest.
Yeah.
And that always kind of puts a bug in the back of people's minds.
Yeah, I think that was an inconsistency leading into 2020 or even 2016. Now there's been this consistent mode that, like, as something ramps up and we see public protest, that like gear does end up being talked about.
Body armor especially.
Yeah. I will say, so we all we don't pick the customers, but we'll handle different people, or like different people are attracted to us in here. I've had a lot more some of our older, like,
I think it's the gray beard.
Yeah, well, no, but like they've been asking serious questions about understanding what is body armor. They're not necessarily buying, but the taboo is being left as far as like, why would I ever need that? And now it's more of a, so if I did need this, what would I need?
Which is amazing, because 80s, 90s, early 2000s, having body armor and getting out with the boys and practicing this stuff, even just going out shooting, was extremely taboo.
I don't know that anybody paid attention to it until North Hollywood. Quite honestly, nobody had ever seen anything where it was like, oh, wait a minute, what did they have? And that was a whole different thing. Yeah. But body armor has always been a movie, like, oh, that saved him, and they peel it off.
Yeah.
But then here locally, people have been like, there's now enough people out there that like there's 6 degrees of separation where they're like, I know somebody who owns kit and body armor.
Yes, it's common use now.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where, because I talk about it all the time, where it's a great item to have for just in case, but it's not just in case. It's a workout thing. It's safety equipment. It's being able to carry your mags. And a lot of people are finally coming around to that idea. And what also is more exciting is just the whole ecosystem as a large umbrella of like, okay, I have my gun, I have my kit. What's next? And that's that community part where it's, hey, me and some friends, we're going to go, you may start by shooting, or honestly, you may just start by making friends.
It could be as simple as like just kind of a ruck, or going hiking with your gear, but it starts a conversation and everybody always turns to it. And it's like, okay, why are you doing this? And it's like, oh, well, I used to have this. I think that's the only way that we continue to push the nylon market in the direction, so that it's not just like, oh, military needs were this. It's like people stretching the ideas of like, well, why are we doing that? Oh, well, that was because we always did this, this, and this. Now it's like, oh, this is actually more ergonomic. This is more,
or in a civilian context, this makes more sense.
Yeah.
Whatever context you want that to be,
right,
in your mind. But it just makes more sense. And like it was Dirty Civilian that said it. Hey, something may not ever happen. We all hope nothing ever happens. But just us having this, us getting out and shooting, us training together, that is a deterrent in and of itself.
that has been my conversation from a CCW side, because we have countless people. The most amount of CCWs I think were received in 2020.
Absolutely.
And so we're at people renewing. The conversation of how often people are like, yeah, I feel safe in that area. I don't carry. And I keep asking people, I'm like, do you think that the people that were at X place when this happened thought they were in a safe place? Because most of the time they were. You can't, it's in cases also, you can't plan for the unexpected. And so there's no way for us to like game plan, like, oh, I see this happening here. I think
if
we're all
something bad's going to happen. It's going to happen here. I'm going to angle myself this way.
No, we have to start thinking, well, no, we really don't know when that's going to
be.
No. And so that's why consistently encouraging CCW carriers like to carry. And if that means that we need to talk about your holster and stuff to make sure that it's comfortable, it's not comfortable. Like carrying, it becomes comfortable, but it's uncomfortable for that person until they work past the discomfort.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing.
No, because you are carrying a pretty big responsibility at that moment.
Absolutely. And it also comes down to lifestyle choices too. Like,
yeah,
hey, maybe instead of going out and just getting hammered with my friends every Saturday night, it's either that or I can carry and go out and,
be DD for them.
Be that designated driver.
Yeah, and actually help.
Yeah, be that positive influence on your friend group.
Yeah, no, it does make you think more. And there's a point where that natural thought just is, oh, well, I'm carrying, I will be carrying, and I'm not going to let alcohol overwhelm.
I think it encourages healthy habits.
Yeah,
in my opinion, because especially like one thing that
and don't drink a white Monster while you're
I mean, one thing that I have not been the best at recently is just being physically fit. But I know it's a lot easier to carry appendix, which is what I carry. You're more physically fit. You have your bigger chest to hide it better. So that's always been kind of something back in my mind that I need to get back into. But it's a lifestyle choice that, okay, to make this even better and more comfortable and more concealable, I'm going to change my lifestyle.
I think the hardest conversation, and this is me looking in a mirror, this is not at anybody listening. This is, of all the things you do consistently, like the health part is the one that really can't ever take a break. Whereas like other trainings and stuff can like come and go.
You can dial them back,
and then you can work on handgun more, or you can work on rifle more, or you can be whatever. But the reality is the consistent one is
moving your body and eating healthy
and
all that. Said I've not been the best at it.
No, it's easy to get stuck.
Oh yeah.
It's really easy to get stuck. And it's really easy. Like I commend so many of the guys who are like content creators, but like Barrel and Hatchet and Dirty Civilian and like all these people who they're doing this stuff. And that's what's changing a lot of what we see, as opposed to guy at a range just shooting a new gun and being like, hey, so we have a new striker fired gun. It's got a new serial number and it's got a new model number.
They're talking about the ecosystem.
Yeah.
They're talking about the civilian defense ecosystem. And a lot of guys will roll their eyes at that. Unfortunately, a lot of veterans, like I'm a veteran myself, didn't do anything cool. But a lot of the veteran community rolls their eyes at it.
But why? But what is, because I think if we could understand that side more, then we can hopefully achieve somehow bettering it.
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I mean, we'll get Jason on here. He actually did the cool stuff. He has been there and done that.
And he's going
to be more qualified to answer that question.
And his approach is not rolling his eyes at it. No, his is more of, hey, can I help you understand something?
Yeah, he has the knowledge base to teach it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, Bruiser's a good example of that.
Yeah.
Like he is not stopping any information getting into people's hands at all. Like if you literally didn't get to go to his class, but you just watched, you can learn so much. So, which is cool. This is a time of way too much information, but it's a
lot of information that I would say for some of it's good information, but just not applicable for a lot of people. Some of it's blatantly false information. And the trouble is, like, part of our job here is kind of filtering through that and figuring
it for everybody.
What works, what doesn't. And to be that filter for you.
Yeah. So. Anything else you wanted to touch on?
I think that kind of, that's a good first episode.
Thank you for listening to probably some rambling. We're going to tighten this up. We're going to have some people on. It's going to be Reno focused. It's going to be people who are part of the Scorpius family. And we look forward to seeing you soon. If you liked what you saw, like it, subscribe, and share it with a friend, because the reality is we just want to keep building this community. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.